What's up everybody, Brian here at BPS Customs, and today we're putting together Client Build 99 Project Shadowhawk. Now before we get into detail about this build, including the parts we chose and why, I wanted to talk a little bit about how this build came to be. A few weeks ago I was contacted by a guy named Dan. Now Dan lives in New York, and he had some questions for me and expressed some interest in having me build him a system. Now, as someone who runs a tech-based YouTube channel, this isn't really an unusual situation. I get emails, I'd say, almost daily from people asking me ridiculous questions ranging from, can you give me a system? I'm poor and I'm only 13, to, hi, I want you to build a system for me. It needs to play games at max settings in 4K. I need to be able to edit all my gameplay footage and upload it to YouTube. And I plan on 3D modeling the universe. I have about $350 to spend. Sometimes I get semi-serious people who express an interest in having a system built, but are really just trying to get me to configure a system for them so that they can build it themselves. These are actually the most frustrating because they usually involve back and forth email chains before we settle on a build days or even weeks later, and then I literally never hear from them again. It's for this unfortunate reason that I've implemented a policy that I no longer give out detailed advice and build guides like this via email to individuals. More often than not, it's just kind of a huge waste of time. When Dan contacted me and laid out his initial thoughts on this system, the first thing I did was tell him, sorry man, I can't help you with your build unless we make it very clear that I'll be the one building it. Considering the nature and financial commitment of this kind of project, I was fairly sure that I would never hear from Dan again. But Dan, being an actual stand-up dude with a full-time job, the proper money to allocate to this kind of project, and the willingness to accept advice and direction, surprised me by saying, yeah man, let's do this. So Dan is what I would consider your typical gamer. He plays some newer games, some older games, and does so on his own timetable. He's not looking to become the next huge Twitch streamer, but he said he does have some aspirations of recording his gameplay and or potentially streaming it at some point soon. His initial thought was that he wanted to base his system on the Skylake i7-6700K, which likely would have suited his needs. But the more I spoke with him, the more it became apparent that he wanted the ability to do more with the system than just play games. He wanted the ability to video edit. He needed a productivity machine. He needed something with an upgrade path. All of these things added together, and we decided to move up to the X99 platform and base the system on the new Broadwell E 6800K. Now I did a high-end desktop showdown a few weeks ago where I pitted this chip against my 6900K and 5820K, and you can find that link to that video right in this general vicinity up here. The 6800K runs at a relatively high clock speed that will boost single-threaded performance in gaming while also being a 6-core chip with hyper-threading, which will allow Dan to tear through rendering tasks. It's also the baby in the Broadwell E lineup, meaning that if Dan feels like in the future he needs some additional computing horsepower, he can always step up to a 6900K or even a 6950X. This wouldn't have been possible with the 6700K as it's the top of the Skylake line, and rumor has it that Kaby Lake will run on the same socket but a completely new chipset. Now originally Dan's vision for this system was for it to sit in the black and silver version of this case, the Be Quiet Dark Base Pro 900. The rest of the components in the system would be jet black, and the only accents would be the case trim and the cable grommets. Unfortunately, neither I nor Dan could find this case in that color combination available for purchase. For that reason, we went in a different direction instead, opting for the all black version. In the interest of full disclosure, I actually tried to dissuade Dan from getting this case. I love Be Quiet products, and the Dark Base Pro 900 is no exception. However, I felt that a case this size would look kind of empty without any additional components to fill it. Dan stuck by his guns though, and he said that he has plans to bring the system back to me in the future to build him a loop, and wanted to make sure he had the case to do it in. Fair enough, I said, let's do it. The brains of the system will be nestled inside the cozy confines of the MSI X99A Gaming Pro Carbon motherboard. This motherboard fits our design aesthetic while also offering outstanding performance and out-of-the-box compatibility with Broadwell E. These are the same reasons I chose to use it in my personal system, Deep Red. Our gaming load will be handled dutifully by EVGA's wonderful GTX 1084 The Wing graphics card, which I reviewed right here. Now, as we were going with an all-black theme, but our graphics card had silver accents on it, I told Dan to put his trust in me when choosing the memory. Now, not only is Corsair Dominator Platinum one of the absolute best memory kits on the market performance-wise, it also has silver bars on the top that will match the EVGA card. A 4x8 gig kit will be plenty for now and allow quad channel operation while still leaving room for expansion, as there will be 4 open DIMM slots. For storage, we've settled on a 1TB Samsung 850 EVO. Dan has a few mechanical hard drives already from past systems, and he felt confident that the EVO would be plenty of storage initially, and he could add the hard disks as needed. Now, cooling the CPU, we have Corsair's H115i, which should keep things nice and chilly in the socket. Powering the whole shebang, we have the Corsair HX750i. This is what I feel is the right amount of power for a system like this. If in the future we end up going SLI, or building a full loop, or both, I might suggest upgrading to something like an EVGA Supernova 1000, as it's so much better to be slightly overpowered than to be slightly underpowered. For now though, this will be great and super power efficient at 80 plus platinum. Now, remember how I said how initially we're gonna go all black but then added in some silver? Well, I called up my buddy Joe from Modders Inc. and gave him the lowdown on our system. We worked out a grayscale color scheme for these custom cables that will hopefully help provide a small amount of highlight and contrast where there would otherwise be none. These look awesome, and Joe does the best work. Check him out at moddersinc.com. I'm super excited and a little anxious to get to work on this beast because these parts have been sitting around my office for a couple weeks now while we waited for the cables to come in. So let's cease with the chit chat and get to work. here it is, we're all done. This is Project Shadowhawk. Now I did want to clear up something, I guess, about the name. I'm not sure how big of a nerd everybody out there is, but I was reading comics in the early 90s, and in the early 90s, one of the comics that Image Comics came out with was called Shadowhawk. Now the hero of the story was somebody who dressed in like a black and silver costume, and when we ended up going with a black and silver theme, Shadowhawk's kind of the first thing I came up with, and it's gonna stick because I'm the only one that needs to know that name. But what do you guys think? I think it came out pretty tight, actually. All the colors really tie in together. The cabling really blends everything and kind of bridges the silver to the black through a series of grays. I don't have the system plugged in right now, but there are RGB LED strips that come with this case that I've installed on the bottom and on the top, and there's a fan controller up top that'll let you cycle through the colors. Now right now I have this set so that these are white, and I also have the board LEDs set to white. So right now the only illumination in the case is a pure white light, and then you have the EVGA logo lit up here, and everything else is black and silver. So you have the same consistent color scheme throughout the entire PC, with the very small exception of the postcode readout on the top, and also the power and reset switches on the bottom, which are built into the motherboard, which unfortunately MSI doesn't give the opportunity to change. I did have a little snafu, I guess, when I was building the PC, and I figured I'd let you guys in on it because, nobody's perfect. So this is a pretty complicated wiring job in the back, trying to hide everything because there are a lot of openings on this side of the case. So I had this whole thing cable managed. It's really nice in the back. Everything's tied down, zipped together. And I took a look at it. I said, I'm pretty happy with this. Let me put the back panel on. Let's get Windows on here and get rolling. So I put the whole case back together, put the back of the case on, hooked it up to a monitor, hooked it up to a power supply, booted it up, started right up. And then when I went to install Windows, Windows basically said to me, dude, there are no drives installed. So I was racking my brain. What exactly is the problem? Why can't Windows find this drive? So I rebooted a couple times. I tried different SATA ports on the motherboard. I figured, why not? Maybe one of them is bad or something. But no matter what I did, Windows kept telling me, no drives, no drives. What the hell, man? What is going on here? So I took the whole thing down. I took the back panel off, and I had forgotten to plug in the SATA cable to the Samsung Evo. So yeah, in my haste to cable manage everything and make everything zip tied down and neat and tidy, I actually forgot to plug in something. So I guess when your IT department says, well, is everything plugged in? Maybe that's not such a stupid question after all. So I'm not gonna benchmark this system, and let me explain to you why. So when I was on the phone with Dan initially and he was explaining to me what he wanted in the system, one of the things he made very clear is that he did not want to overclock any of the components. Even though I explained to him that if you overclock within reason, keep the voltages safe, and manage the heat, there's really no danger, he kept saying he did not want to overclock. He wants to preserve the life of his components, and I 100% respect that. So nothing in here is overclocked. As a result, I'm not going to put this through a whole battery of tests. I've already done a burn-in using IDA64. Temperatures with the H115i at 100% load for almost a half hour on this CPU were in the low 50s or high 40s. Those are really good temperatures, and I think he's going to be really happy with that. What I did do in EVGA Precision X is I did crank up the fan curve, and I also increased the power target for the GTX 1080. That's going to allow the card to stay a little bit cooler and also boost a little bit higher without actually overclocking the core or the memory. So that's kind of a wrap, guys. That's Project Shadowhawk. I think it came out great. I sent a couple pictures over to Dan. He said he was ecstatic with it. He said that it exceeded his expectations as far as how it looked. And you know what? I think it's going to exceed his expectations about how it's going to perform as well. So what did you guys think? What would you have done differently with this build? This is the client build. There was not much leeway here for me. I didn't really get to make many of the decisions, although I was able to give my input. But at the same time, you have this kind of a budget. How would you spend it? Let me know in the comments down below. Also, don't forget to toss a like on this video and get subscribed to the channel if you're not already. I have more specialty builds coming up. I'm working on a special project with AlphaCool where we're going to do a crazy water-cooled system inside a very small case. So stay tuned for that and make sure you're watching for upcoming videos. I'm Brian with BPS Customs. Thanks for watching, guys, as always.